there are probably people listening thinking, well, it's good to hold companies up. This is a new technology.
Yeah,
you know, who knows what's going to happen.
In fact, there's disagreement about that within the AI community. If there are a bunch of people who are like, hey, like this could have the potential to kill us all. On the other side of the coin, you've got people in the industry and inside these companies who will say, if we don't do it, China's going to do it. And if China wins the AI race, we're screwed. And so we have to get there first. And the way to get there first is take the brakes off and go as fast as possible.
I'm Joanna Coles. This is the Daily Beast podcast, and this is a bonus episode where we're going to ask what is going on with the government and AI, and what is this new advisory committee that's been set up by the Trump administration? What is David Sacks, the AI czar, actually doing there? And how is the tech community set to benefit from him being there? And talking about this today is going to be our guest, Dick Costolo, who is himself an AI investor and was the CEO of Twitter. So he sat in rooms with President Obama talking about the tech community and about the White House. And he's got very interesting observations about why the tech community went from feeling that politics was nothing to do with them and they didn't want to be involved to, oh, we need to have a role in this government. So, on to that in 1 second, but before I do, just reminding you, we are independent media. Please press the subscribe button, join the Daily Beast community. You can become a Beast tier of membership and leave us a comment telling us what you think about the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe to the Daily Beast itself. We keep you up to date on how to navigate the zone, which I think it's fair to say has been well and truly flooded. Let's get into it with Dick Costolo. Dick Costolo, I have been trying to have this conversation with you for so long, and now we're finally having it because you've launched your own podcast, the Nick, Dick and Paul Show.
Yeah, I'm the middle name in the Nick, Dick and Paul Show.
Okay, and we're going to come on to that in a bit.
Let's do.
But for people who don't know you, you've had an incredible impact actually on social media and the way we all talk to each other and the whole sort of run up.
The good parts.
The good parts.
And some of the bad parts.
And some of the bad parts. But let's start with the fact that you left university and you went to Second City to become a comedian. And of course you but one of the most important jobs on the way to where you are now is you were CEO of Twitter. But let's start with your comedy background.
Yeah. So I actually studied computer science at University of Michigan. I have a CS degree, but when I graduated, I decided I started doing comedy my second semester senior year and decided it would be a lot more fun to be on Saturday Night Live. So the way to get on Saturday Night Live at the time was you either were in Second City in Chicago or Lorne Michaels found you through some other means. There are lots of ways to get there now. But at the time, you kind of had to go to Second City in Chicago and improvise there and eventually audition. I actually got there the same day Steve Carell did. He and I were in the same sort of training center group at Second City, working our way up. And ended up being there for 6-7 years and performing at a bunch of other improv places around town. But I was at Second City at the same time as Adam McKay, who famously went on to be head writer at SNL and then directed Anchorman and The Big Short and a bunch of other great movies. Amy Poehler, Tina Fey, Rachel Dratch was a good friend of mine. I mean, all these folks were all there at the same time. So it was an amazing time to be there. I ended up auditioning for SNL twice and didn't get it either time. Was like, okay, it's time to go put the computer science degree to use.
So you were one of the few people in tech who A, knew how to present and connect with an audience, and B, had a sense of humor.
Yeah, who wasn't staring at their shoes while they were talking or into the abyss or whatever.
Right.
I remember I got asked when I first joined Twitter, I was on a CNBC hit live from some conference, and the producer was like, are you going to be okay? This is live TV. And I was like, I've been booed in front of thousands of people at midnight, and this is not going to be a problem.
So So there's so many aspects of tech I want to talk to you about, but let's kick off talking about Trump and tech.
Okay.
And this new advisory committee that he set up, which has got Mark Andreessen on it, it's got Mark Zuckerberg on it, it's got Jensen Huang, the founder of NVIDIA, on it. It's got the great and the good, the big billionaire, multi-billionaire founders on it. What are they going to be doing? Because I know you were on a tech advisory for Obama, which I want to come on to. But what is this new advisory going to do?
First of all, it's very Facebook/Meta heavy. Mark Andreessen and Mark Zuckerberg are both on the Facebook board. So one might imagine some of the suggestions coming out of the advisory board would be to do things that Mr. Zuckerberg would appreciate. But secondly, and I believe David Sachs is chairing it, who's been in the White House for a while now, and we can talk about his background as well. I find it hard to believe that it was initiated by President Trump, because I would imagine he would think, like, what are you guys going to advise me on that I need help with? It just doesn't seem like his personality. Meanwhile, the Biden administration, on the other hand, I think would have set up like 17 different advisory boards, some of which would advise each other on what they should be talking about at the next advisory board meeting. One might imagine it's further deregulation. They've done a bunch of deregulation and freeing up the crypto companies to have more free reign to do things. I'm guessing it'll be more of that, or maybe doing the same with AI.
So when you saw all those founders of the tech companies at the inauguration for Trump the second time round, what did you think?
There's been this interesting migration in Silicon Valley from, I would say, 20 years ago. There was very much a, like, politics is something that happens there, and we don't get wrapped up in that. We're doing our own stuff over here, and that's this other thing that other people worry about that we don't really care about. I think what happened was, during the Biden administration, you may remember Lena Khan came in as chairperson of the FTC.
And she was the 35-year-old who'd never created a job in her life, but she'd written a thesis at Yale saying that Amazon should be broken up.
Correct. And had never, you just made the key point, never had created a single job in her life, wrote this thesis on why Amazon should be broken up. And then, putting her instincts to work, the company Adobe offered to buy Figma for $20 billion. Figma is a design company. And she and the FTC, essentially, to make a long story short, she and her FTC blocked it. And that was really, I think, the beginning of, or the middle of Silicon Valley saying, wait a minute, we got to start paying a lot more attention here, because they're starting to mess with our ability to create build great companies, have them exit with the entrepreneur, the CEO in this case and founder Dylan Figma, going on to Adobe and maybe becoming an investor later, or running this group within Adobe and everyone making a tremendous amount of money. Once she blocked that, I think that was really part of the beginning of Silicon Valley saying, all right, this is not okay. We need to get more involved here. And the longer answer is, it was much more than just Lena Khan. There's the CFTC, there's the SEC, which was heavily regulating crypto, and Robinhood, you can't do XYZ with crypto, and Coinbase, no, you can't do these sorts of things. Now, I'll say one other thing, which is, it's perfectly reasonable to say, you shouldn't have giant monopolies that just can turn the screws on people and cost consumers a fortune. But again, going back to the explicit Adobe Figma case, there's very few people in the country who would have had any, for whom the Adobe Figma acquisition would have had any effect or any impact on their ability to save money or affordability or anything like that. It was just sort of like, we're just going to be meddlesome. Prior to the Obama administration, Silicon Valley sort of viewed DC as like, they do their thing, we do our thing. As long as everybody leaves each other alone, we don't really care about what's going on over there. I think it would be fair to say most of Silicon Valley was left-leaning or Democratic-leaning, like the population of California, mostly a blue state. And fairly liberal. So it was early 2011. I was in a morning, I've said this before, but but I was in my morning status meeting with my direct reports, and my assistant comes to the office and whispers, "Phone call for you." I was like, "I'll call him back. I'm in a meeting, whatever, And she goes, "It's the White House." And I'm born and raised in the Midwest of the United States. My immediate thought was, I didn't do anything. What did I do? Why I didn't do
You're
anything.
in trouble.
Yeah, I'm in trouble.
Headmaster.
I'm in trouble. Why are they calling me? So I go out and then I was also like, wait, how do you know it's the White House? Did someone just call? And anyways, Valerie Jarrett, and she wanted me, can you come to, Washington, D.C. on Friday and meet with the president?
Valerie Jarrett was his chief of staff.
Valerie Jarrett was Obama's chief of staff at the time. Of course, the answer is, I think the answer is yes. So I go, and we're in the Lincoln room in the White House, and it's me, and let's see, Brian Roberts from Comcast, and Eric Schmidt from Google, and Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook, and Randall Stevenson from AT&T, and all the way at Reed Hastings, and sort of all around the table. And Obama asked me the first question. I'm like, like you're in the room with all these people who have been in business, and he asked me the first question, and I answer it. And I remember this like it was yesterday. And the president turns to Sheryl Sandberg and says, "Sheryl, what do you think about that?" And Sheryl says, "Well, first of all, Mr. President, I just want to thank you for inviting us all here." And I was like, shit, damn it,
Because
the protocol.
Yeah,
I just answered the question. And Sheryl does the, correct first. And I was like, and I hit the table. I slammed the table down, and everyone stops and looks at me, and I was like, I meant to say that, and Sheryl wasn't
she wasn't amused, but
I wasn't amused by me interrupting
the rest of
her.
The table laughed, right? You brought some humor to the room.
Yeah. Brian Roberts kicked me under the table. Anyway.
Okay, and then what were your future relationships like with the Obama government? Did they want to interfere? Were they curious?
Well, I would say that you would get requests. And I have to be clear, it's not necessarily that this was all the Obama administration. It would be like the FBI would send some request for hey, or some federal bureau would send a request, and it would generally be things like for example, I'll give you a example. We think these 2 or 3 accounts are terrorist accounts, and we want access to the direct messages to see if they're, planning something in the U.S. One of the things that's been reported is, well, Twitter would just do whatever the, Biden administration or Obama administration asked them to do. It's simply not true. We would go back to the agency and say, you have to have a valid court order. You can't just say, we can't tell you why we think this, but we want to see the DMs for this account. You have to go to some court to which you can show the reasons you think it's we don't need to see it, but you have to go to some federal court to whom you can show the reasons you think it's a terrorist account. And if you get a valid court order saying you have to hand over the information from account X and account Y, then we'll obey a valid court order. But we're not just going to respond to whatever requests you send over the wall.
So you wanted a proper process in place.
Yeah, we just weren't going to just hand over random requests for, we want to look at this account because we think it's a bad guy. You have to go get some court to validate that you've got a good reason to look at this. And
how often was that happening?
I would say a couple times a year. At the time, 2010 to 2015, ISIS, the terrorist group ISIS and Al-Qaeda were active on the social network. So it wasn't like we didn't think there were any accounts. There were lots of accounts that were pretty clearly, promoting, the bad guys and ISIS. We just wanted to have look, we've got to have something that we can fall back on to say there was a valid court order for this thing. Otherwise, we start handing over random accounts, and one of them some American citizen who hasn't done anything wrong and sues us or takes action against the government. Why are we going to say we did it?
So were you constantly combing accounts, and when you saw suspicious activity, closing them down? Or because I'm assuming you didn't want ISIS on the platform.
Yeah, we would close down accounts that were clearly terrorist accounts promoting terrorist activity publicly. I'll give you the classic canonical example from my years running Twitter where ISIS gets these pilots that have been shot down in a jet, and they put them in a cage in orange jumpsuits, and they basically light them on fire inside these cages and kill them. And they start posting the photos and videos to Twitter and YouTube and on and on and on. And, we say, our trust and safety team and our general counsel say, just delete, any account, suspend any account that posts these photos and videos of these pilots being, lit on fire. And the New York Post posts the photo to their Twitter account of the pilot in the cage being lit on fire, and the use trust and safety team suspend.
Right.
I'm going about my day doing whatever I'm doing, and I think I get a text from might have been Kara Swisher or someone's like, "Why'd you guys suspend the New York Post account?" And I'm like, "What?" Find the general counsel. General counsel's like, I'm sure, and then sure enough, and then we're like, okay, and that was really maybe my first exposure to. You can create these hard and fast rules that seem totally obvious and why wouldn't you just shut down any account that posts this?
Mm-hmm.
And inevitably there's some exception. And so these things were just super, super challenging to should we delete this one or not delete this one? I remember when Elon bought the company years after I was gone.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, Elon Musk, sorry. When Elon bought Twitter years after, seven or so years after I had left, and Jack had been CEO in the interim, Parag and
Jack Dorsey,
and then Parag Agrawal for a little bit. He was like, "Well, we have to get rid of all the bots. There's too many bots. We got to get rid of the bots." Well, the New York Times weather account is a bot. It just tweets out the weather every morning. Okay, well, all the bots except the New York Times. The U.S. Geological Survey account when it detects an earthquake is a bot. Well, anyway, all these things are when people make these blanket statements about why don't you just do X. I have in the back of my mind the 19 reasons why. Yeah, it's not like we didn't think of that. There are just a million exceptions to the rule, and it's never as obvious as you thought it was going to be.
Right, and the New York Post never let Twitter forget that it had.
They never let. That was one of those got brought up very, very frequently as as you'll remember, they censored us.
Yeah,
it was like, okay, we created a rule that we thought was going to only apply to the terrorist accounts because they were all promoting it. And you guys did the same thing, and someone on the trust and safety team in, wherever country went, oh, that meets that rule, delete. It wasn't like we're going to get, there was no, we're out to get the right-wing media or whoever. Yeah.
Right. So what do you make of Twitter now? And I will say I don't go on it nearly as much as I used to. I think of your days, and this isn't just because we're friends, but the highlight.
Let's call them the glory days.
The glory days. The glory days. Now
the glory days, if you will.
That Substack has become the new Twitter in many ways.
Okay.
But what do you make of Twitter now?
It's still very, very relevant. It just is. If you're a tech, maybe be more specific. If you're a technology investor or venture capitalist, or you're a tech founder in San Francisco or New York or wherever, and you're very, very much a part of the tech scene, you have to be on Twitter. It's all the announcements, all the discussions about fundings, all the product launches, all the back and forth about the merits of a product launch or an acquisition or whatever. That's all still happening on Twitter.
But that's
maybe
a
even
tiny
more,
group, isn't it?
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. It's you can say it's a niche. I get that. But for me, and the business that I'm in as a tech investor, you have to be on it, and you have to be on it regularly. It still all happens there.
But what about the argument that it's just become full of AI slop, that it's unbelievably unpleasant, that every time I go on it, I just get sort of inundated by bot hate, which is just completely uninteresting.
Yeah, there's a lot of that on there for sure. And I think a fair criticism of all of these platforms is they optimize for sending you down the vortex of, making you, angry.
Conflict, right? They serve up conflict and bots saying you're a piece of shit or whatever, which aren't even real. So why would I engage?
And there are, there are influencers, as we know, on both the right and the left, who monetize hatred, right? They're like, in fact, I'm sure there are people on the right and again on the left who are like, shoot, that guy or that woman is out right-winging me or out far lefting me.
Right.
I gotta go even further to get my engagement back up to get as many people to like, you're a jerk, or I can't believe this.
Right.
That's what feeds the beast and causes your post to be promoted on the platform. So There's no question that that is a big problem. And, I hear regularly from people who are like, I can't go on these things anymore. I just end up angry and, yelling at the wall after 5 minutes.
And do you think that they've actually coarsened the discourse?
Of course. I would say they've polarized the discourse, because you're served up the polarizing response. You're not served up the reasonable response. I'll give you a specific example. Mark Andreessen this morning, Mark is on this sort of like, men of action bit. He's on.
And he's the founder of Andreessen.
I'm sorry. I know I need to set the
just
stage.
for people who aren't
Mark
involved
Andreessen
in
basically invented the web browser, basically invented, Mozilla, and went on to be one of the founders of Netscape. And then along with Ben Horowitz, who was an engineering manager at Netscape, they founded a company called LoudCloud, sold that, and then went on to found Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of, if not the biggest venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. And so Mark has been on this, men of action series of posts on Twitter about, like introspection is, a recent phenomenon, and, men of action, if they can't sit there and dwell on the consequences too long, and, otherwise it's a waste of time. And I'm summarizing, but anyway, he had this post this morning that was like, really dumb people say things like, just do it. And, sort of smart middle management people write a 20-page strategy deck. And Napoleon said, you can't dwell on the potential consequences for too long, because it might even waste more time than you should have just acted and gone forth, like all great men. And it turns out to be an apocryphal tweet. It's actually from a book of maxims by Napoleon, many of which are fabricated. And one person had actually written a response like that. That's not the first response, which would sort of further the discourse. And actually, it's interesting. There's this book of, Napoleon aphorisms, many of which are fabricated. And the first response is, you're a moron,
Right.
The Stoics, all of Buddhism, St. Augustine. These people were all great introspective men, you idiot, or whatever, And so you don't get the discourse unless you like scroll past the, you're a jerk. No, you're a jerk. And then there's someone responding back with like, yeah, or whatever. And so it's unfortunate, but that's the stuff that gets the most engagement, is the angry retort.
So
and the hyperbolic post, right? If the initial post had been less hyperbolic or more like, I don't know, longer, and here's how I think about the world, people would be like, I don't have time to read that. They're just,
right.
I want to see the, give me the punch in the face.
Will we ever put the genie back in the bottle?
Well, interestingly enough, there's a great article about this just the other day. Interestingly enough, AI, the LLMs like ChatGPT and Claude from Anthropic and Gemini from Google, they actually tend to bring people back toward the middle. So to the extent you give them if you think about what they're trained on,
right?
These AI tools have read the entirety of the internet and all the posts on Reddit and so they'll tend to funnel you toward a reasoned middle ground answer.
But what, do you mean answer to a specific question? Because you're not on it like a thread, like you are
an answer
with
to a specific
Reddit
question. Like,
right.
I think, this conservative politician in, or Viktor Orban is a jerk and blah, 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 like, is what's the right way to think about these things? Or any such question about a left-wing or right-wing politician or policy even. The AI tools will tend to guide you toward a middle ground opinion. And there are any number of people out there now who will say, like, I had this sort of view of the world that was X, and I've been brought back toward the center by arguing it out with the AI tool. So it's possible, and it's because the AI is, taking them sort of the middle ground of all these things and coming up with some answer, right? If you ask, go to ChatGPT and just say, pick any random number 1 through 10. It will always come back with 7. And it's because 7 is when you go out and look at the internet and look for the 35-year-old guys on Reddit saying a random number 1 through 10,
right,
the most often one is 7.
So interesting.
So you're getting this sort of average of all of the response. And it's possible that AI sort of, pulls everyone. If social media pushed everyone to the sides of the room,
margins,
to the margins, it's possible that AI brings everybody back toward the middle.
So are you an AI optimist?
I'm an AI pragmatist.
Okay, so what does that mean?
I think the AI optimist would tell you, one of the things the AI optimist would tell you is it's not going to eliminate jobs. It actually turns out that anytime there's a great new technology innovation, more jobs are created. And in fact, one of the things that the AI optimists like to throw out there as proof of this is, when ATMs were created, when cash machines were created, the number of bank tellers in the US went up.
It did?
It did. However,
right.
So the chart they show you is invention of ATMs, number of bank teller jobs going up. And you're like, oh, proves
That's
their
not
point.
so bad.
That's not so bad. Look. However, what happened was around the same time the ATMs were, started to be rolled out in large quantities in the 80s, banking was deregulated and banks flourished, and lots more branches of banks were opened around the entire country. And so there were tons more bank branches open around the country. The number of tellers per bank branch went down.
Okay, that's
and
interesting.
So you see this chart that goes like this, and then eventually there's banking consolidation, and they start buying each other, and now not only do the number of tellers per bank start to decrease dramatically, the number of overall tellers decreases dramatically. Right. There were lots and lots more branches, not because ATMs created more job opportunities for tellers. All by way of setting up, I think it's crazy to think that you're going to be able to use AI to make you and your company lots and lots and lots and lots and lots more productive, and also going to need a lot more people in roles. It's already the case that Claude Code, for instance, is so extraordinarily powerful. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I think the people at Anthropic would tell you that the next version of Claude Code was written by the previous version of Claude Code.
Oh, wow.
And it's just going to be the case that there will be fewer programming jobs because AI will write the code. And then that will be true. And then that will be true for lots and lots of other industries.
But we've been through these stages before: the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the tech revolution. What do you see as likely being the jobs that'll be created by AI?
It's a good question. There are probably lots, but I think we as humans have been historically very bad at predicting even the first derivative consequences of the next technology that rolls out. As evidenced by, go back and look at any of the predictions about, various now infamous predictions about any technology rolling out, like Steve Ballmer's famous prediction about the iPhone. That's not going to work, or certainly not going to cause people to.
And he was a co-founder of Microsoft.
He was a CEO of Microsoft.
Or CEO of Microsoft,
after Bill Gates.
Right, and the owner of the Clippers.
When you look at the actual predictions about these things, it's very, very rarely do we nail it on the head with what's about to happen.
Okay, so one of Silicon Valley's own sons, David Sachs, has gone to run AI policy in the White House.
Yeah.
What is he actually doing there? Is he just, as a lot of people say, helping himself, or trying to figure out the best investments he can make? Because if you have a government contract and you're an AI company or you're a tech company, then you are, 10 times as likely to grow and B, survive.
Yeah, so maybe I'll step back and describe talk about who he is. David Sachs is a technology executive. He was actually the first chief operating officer at PayPal, if I remember correctly. There's a whole PayPal mafia of, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and David Sachs and Reid Hoffman and Kevin Hart and they're Joe Lonsdale. I think Joe was there.
It's an incredible lineup.
Yeah, no,
who also go on to do other things. Reid Hoffman started LinkedIn.
Yeah, and
Elon started everything.
Yeah. It's pretty remarkable. It'll be curious to see whether that ends up being rivaled by one of the AI companies here going forward or not. But it's a pretty incredible lineup of people and what they've gone on to do. Anyway, so David was the first COO there, I think. He went on to found a company called Yammer, which was kind of like Slack. It was like Slack for enterprise workers that sold to Microsoft in 2012, I think. He was the reason I know this is because Yammer was in the Twitter building. So he was on the floor. He was a couple floors below us in the Twitter building.
On where was that? On Market Street?
On Market Street in
Right.
in
I remember
San
coming to
Francisco.
see you in that
Yeah,
office.
thank you. It was very kind of you to do that. And he sold that for $1.2 billion to Microsoft in 2012, which was a lot of money at the time.
Right.
The numbers that
Now
get thrown
seems
around today, you're like
peanuts.
1.2 billion.
Peanuts.
Why did you sell? How many people were there? 4? Yeah.
Right. It's amazing to think Instagram was sold for $1 billion with 8 people, right?
Yeah,
Look at it
yeah,
now.
Yeah. Although at the time I knew, as you may know, I had tried to buy it a month earlier unsuccessfully. And when that was sold and the media was shouting, can you believe they bought this company for $1 billion? It's only 8 people. We sort of knew inside Twitter, like, oh man, they got it and we didn't, and that's going to hurt. And it did. Anyway, so David, the point being, he's been in Silicon Valley forever. He's also a member of this All In podcast, which is based on these guys who play poker all the time, and the title of their podcast is All In.
And that's Jason Calacanis and
Chamath
Chamath
and David
Palihapitiya.
Freeberg and David Sachs. So he's part of that crew. By the way, he's also the founding partner of a venture firm called Craft Ventures.
Right.
So when he took this job, there was a lot of, he's just going to favor his investments and pump them. My understanding is, I know you have to sort of divest yourself of a bunch of your investments when you go take these jobs in the
Aren't you
administration.
supposed to put them in a blind trust?
Yeah, you're supposed to put them in a blind trust. And to be perfectly frank, it's not clear how well that's ever worked or how much of that has ever been done. I'm sure some people do it fully, and I'm sure some people do it like it's in a blind trust that's run by my cousin Phil.
Right.
Yeah, who has a burner phone that gets an occasional text.
Right.
I don't know why he wanted to go into the administration. I don't know why anyone would want to go into politics, frankly, and leave what would seem to be a pretty nice life, having been the COO at PayPal and sold a company to Microsoft that you were the founder and CEO for over $1 billion and having a great time on your podcast. It seems like going into politics would be a lot of pain and suffering. And mostly what I think they've been working toward is trying to remember, I earlier said that the Biden administration has sort of ground some of the gears of a crypto advancement and AI to a little bit of a halt with regulation, and then we got to be careful about X, Y, Z, and let's not make any decisions yet. I think what David has gone there to do is let's speed a bunch of this up and get out of the way and let people go as fast as possible.
So, and is that a good thing? I mean, I can think that there are probably people listening thinking, well, it's good to hold companies up. This is a new technology.
Yeah,
who knows what's going to happen?
In fact, there's disagreement about that within the AI community. If there are a bunch of people who are like, hey, this could have the potential to kill us all. Let's and they even there are entire organizations within OpenAI and Anthropic and Google on the Gemini team working on safety and precaution and writing paper after paper after paper on how are we going to do this, and here are the challenges with doing it. And there are these things called red teams within these organizations that work to try to see if they can figure out a way to break the guardrails that have been put in place in the latest versions, et cetera. On the other side of the coin, you've got people in the industry and inside these companies who will say, if we don't do it, China's going to do it. And if China wins the AI race, we're screwed.
Right.
And so we have to get there first. And the way to get there first is take the brakes off and go as fast as possible. The reality, of course, is that, it's not A or B. You can do one and you can go quickly and still try to have guardrails and make sure you're doing things the right way and have red teams testing things and so forth.
Okay, so how significant was it when the founder of Anthropic said to Pete Hegseth and the Department of Defense/War, okay, you cannot just use our products any way you want? They've been working with them for some time, and Anthropic sort of said, no, you can't do that. Then OpenAI came in and said, here you go, you can do whatever you like. What was that actually about?
The guess answer is something like this. My understanding is that Anthropic reasonably has some, again, AI guardrails in place to make sure that things like, I'm going to be I'm just going to give a simple example. The AI can't make a decision to kill someone or blow up a building without a human in the loop. You've got to have a human in the loop to verify, like, is this really the bad guy we want to shoot? Is this really the building we want to take out? And my this is all, like, I don't know this.
Right,
I'm
it's
guessing.
hypothetical.
Yeah, it's hypothetical. My understanding is that the Pentagon and the military are like, no, we want to be able, we need to be able to, once the AI makes a decision, we want to be able to go forward with that, with whatever it's decided to do, with or without a human in the loop. So it was something like that, right? Anthropic had some set of guardrails that are like, it's very dangerous if you start letting the AI decide who and what to shoot and kill without somebody confirming something, and the Pentagon saying, like, we want to use it to blow up things or whatever. So that's some form of that was the argument. Now, the people who think that Anthropic and Dario are wrong.
And Dario is the co-founder of Anthropic.
Co-founder and CEO of Anthropic. The people who think that Dario and Anthropic were wrong say, well, when you buy Microsoft Excel, Microsoft doesn't get to tell you, here are 2 things you can't do with Excel.
Right.
Like, they don't get to tell you how to use the product. In fact, when you buy any tech product, the person who sold it to you, the vendor, doesn't get to say, here's the product, but you can't use it for this. Look, the whole threat of AGI, artificial general intelligence, and ASI, artificial superintelligence, the entire threat is, what if we take out humans out of the loop and it becomes Hal from the movie 2001 and just decides, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't let you open the hatch doors and you're going to die. Or I've decided to do this and there's no human in the loop, and that decision is to wipe out, some population. In other words, the people who take Dario's side are, this isn't Microsoft Excel. This is something that can make a decision about some portion of the future of humanity at some point. And if we take the guardrails down now, people are going to look back and go, remember when those idiots decided to take the guardrails down?
Right.
That's why, Manhattan doesn't exist anymore. Or what, right?
God.
That's what the Dario supporters would tell you. You can't get rid of the guardrails. You have to have these things in place. Otherwise, we're all in big, big trouble.
Well, and the things are humans, right? You've got to have humans signing off on it.
Yeah, the things are humans. You've got to have humans signing off. Again, this is a very also simplified version of the discussions that are actually going on, right? People, like, if Dario were watching it, he'd be like, that's not technically what happened, but you get it. This is the kind of discussion that was taking place, with the Pentagon saying, hey man, you don't get to tell us how to use your thing we just paid hundreds of millions of dollars for. This is what we want to do with it. And him saying, like, I won't sign off on you allowing to, you can't use the product if you're going to use it that way.
Right. So talk a little bit about your own podcast, because you're now having these kinds of discussions with the writer Nick Bilton and then Paul Kudrowski.
Yeah, he's Paul Kudrowski, who's an investor in Polymath. So the idea behind the podcast is, instead of having one of the, kind of going back to our discussion about social media, instead of having one of these polarizing, those people are idiots, here's what's really happening, and this is why this is going on, we wanted to have an actual, pick a topic and then have real discourse about the pros and cons of it. Hear what some people believe. This is why people on the other side of the coin believe this other thing. And here's some interesting middle ground and some potential implications of it that's not, like, mired in politics and hyperbole and, those guys over there are jerks. So everything's just so hyper politicized now.
Right. And are you enjoying doing it?
Yeah, we're loving doing it. And it's sort of media, technology, and current events.
But I have watched several episodes.
And they're
really
hilarious.
Enjoyed it. Well, and also, they're full of interesting, slightly lateral thinking about, for example,
that's a good way of putting it, lateral thinking.
And there was a very good one about actually whether or not you go to war is dictated by the average age of the population. There's a whole correlation there.
It turns out that the likelihood of a country to go to war can be directly correlated to the average age of the population. And the younger the average age of the population of the country, the more likely they are to go to war.
Right.
Linearly. Like it's literally a direct drops as the population ages.
So the and one of the stats I found really interesting was that in the Civil War, the American Civil War, the average age of the population was 19.
Yeah. When you ask people to guess,
19.
they never get their.
Yeah, no, I was like, come on,
28.
I literally thought, oh, it's 27. It must be 27, but in fact, it's 19. And of course, they're the group that end up losing the most lives.
Yeah.
What is the average age of the American population now?
Well, it's much higher, so it sort of goes against that particular trend.
Well, Trump goes against the trend, right? I don't think I'm not sure the entire country even knew we were going to war until we woke up on Saturday and he was like, surprise.
Yeah, I mean, you can sort of see it, right? If you're a 19-year-old male and you're across the table or the sea from someone you hate, and you've got testosterone coursing through your veins, you're like, man, I really want to punch that guy, And then when you're 52 and you're across the table from, you're like, man, I really want soup.
You really want soup. I love talking to you, and I'm so glad that you found time to come and talk to us in between your investments. All right, so very quickly, give us a sense of the investments that you're excited about.
It's mostly artificial intelligence right now, but it's bled into every possible nook and cranny of the economy. I'll give you just a couple quick examples, and those include there will be autonomous construction companies, like the diggers, the backhoes, et cetera, that are just like the autonomous cars that Elon Musk and others talk about when they talk about the robo-taxi or Waymos. There will be entire construction sites that are automated and AI-based, which is really feels like you're in the future when you start talking about that kind of thing, but it's real.
Will they be able to do the ballroom?
They'll be. I'm sure that they would. I'm sure that
I think that's why David Sachs is really there.
Well, the ballroom looms larger than it really should. It sort of seems to be always discussed all the time, and it may be a function of the president doing that, but it really looms large over like the country. It's just an adjacent space.
It's so much more than that,
right,
Dick Costolo. It's so much more.
All right,
we're polarized. We're polarized.
This goes to show you how naive I am about some things.
All right, Dick, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
If you have been, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to The Daily Beast. You can stay up to date minute by minute on what on earth is going on out there, including with AI and the ballroom. So the good news is we have so many Beast tier members now. There are too many names to read out, and we really appreciate your support. Thanks to our production team, Devon Rogerino, Ryan Murray, Rachel Passer, Heather Passaro, Neil Rosenhaus.